Take a second and think about your morning. You wake up, you step into a shower, hot water on demand, a bottle of soap that strips oil and grime off your skin in seconds, shampoo formulated by chemists, a toothbrush, a towel. 10 minutes later, you walk out clean, and you don't think about it again for the rest of the day. Now imagine that entire process doesn't exist. No soap, no running water, no shampoo, not even the concept of clean the way you understand it. That wasn't a primitive inconvenience for most of human history. That was simply what being human meant for roughly 300,000 years, right up until embarrassingly recently. So the obvious question is, how did anyone survive that? No infections wiping out entire groups, no permanent layer of grime, somehow just functioning. And the answer is stranger, more resourceful, and honestly a little grosser than you'd expect. Let's start with what was actually at stake, because it's bigger than just smelling bad. Skin isn't just a covering. It's your first line of defense against infection, and every cut, scrape, insect bite, and open wound was a door for bacteria to get in. Without any way to clean a wound, a small injury that you'd shrug off today, a scraped knee, a splinter, a thorn scratch, could turn into a life-threatening infection within days. Archaeologists studying ancient skeletal remains regularly find evidence of chronic infections, abscesses, and bone damage consistent with wounds that never properly healed. Getting clean wasn't vanity. It was survival infrastructure, the same category as fire and shelter, just quieter and far less talked about. So let's start with the most basic tool humans have always had access to: water. Rivers, lakes, and rain were the original bathroom. Early humans rinsed off in whatever water source was nearby, and that alone does more than people assume. Plain water physically removes loose dirt, sweat, and surface bacteria, even without any cleaning agent. It's not as effective as soap at breaking down oil, but it's far from nothing, which meant that for most of human prehistory, staying near clean water wasn't just about drinking. It was hygiene infrastructure, and it's probably no coincidence that so many major ancient settlements formed along rivers in the first place. But water alone doesn't cut through oil and grease, and human skin produces plenty of both. So at some point, people needed something with actual chemical cleaning power. And the first real answer to that problem came from something already sitting in every campfire: ash. Wood ash, when mixed with water, creates a mild alkaline solution. Alkaline substances are exactly what breaks down oils and fats, which is the entire chemical principle modern soap still runs on today. Archaeological and textual evidence from ancient Mesopotamia shows Sumerians using water combined with sodium carbonate, a naturally occurring alkaline salt often derived from plant ash, specifically for cleaning. The same civilization used beer and hot water to clean wounds, likely because the alcohol content offered at least some antimicrobial benefit, even though nobody at the time understood germs. And this wasn't just casual folk knowledge. Clay cylinders recovered from ancient Babylon, dated to roughly 2,800 BCE, contain what historians consider the oldest known written soap recipe: animal fat boiled together with wood ash. That combination, fat plus alkaline ash, is chemically almost identical to how soap is made today. The Babylonians weren't guessing. They had a documented, repeatable formula nearly 5,000 years ago, written down specifically so it could be passed on and repeated exactly. Meanwhile, over in ancient Egypt, people took a different but parallel approach. Egyptians were known for bathing regularly, and they developed cleansing substances made from vegetable oils, animal fats, and alkaline salts, used both for washing and for treating skin irritation. Cleanliness in Egyptian culture wasn't just practical. It carried religious weight, tied closely to ideas of purity used in ritual and worship, which is part of why Egyptian hygiene practices were unusually sophisticated for their time. Priests in particular were expected to bathe multiple times a day and shave their entire bodies, since ritual purity demanded a level of cleanliness far beyond what an average person needed to bother with. Now, the Greeks and Romans took a completely different route, and it's the one that would look strangest to modern eyes. Instead of lathering with anything like soap, they coated their bodies in scented olive oil, worked it into the skin, and then scraped it back off using a curved metal tool called a strigil. The oil would loosen dirt and dead skin as it sat on the body, and the strigil would physically drag all of it away in one motion. Wealthier Romans used softer, refined oils, sometimes imported and heavily perfumed. Common citizens often used harsher, ash-based cleansers instead, since good oil was relatively expensive. Bathing itself became a massive part of Roman public life, with elaborate bathhouses functioning as much as social and civic spaces as places to actually get clean, complete with hot rooms, cold plunge pools, and attendants whose entire job was scraping oil off wealthy patrons. But not every ancient cleaning method was quite so refined, and this is where it gets genuinely strange. In ancient Rome, urine was collected specifically for its ammonia content and used by launderers to whiten and clean togas. Public collection jars were placed on street corners for exactly this purpose, and there was even a tax on urine collection at one point, because the demand for it as a cleaning agent was that significant. Ammonia is a real and effective cleaning agent, still used in modern products today, so the underlying chemistry wasn't wrong. It's also believed urine was used more directly for personal hygiene in certain circumstances, which is exactly as unpleasant as it sounds, but functionally, it worked. Animal fat itself, even without being turned into proper soap, was sometimes used as a standalone cleanser. People would smear rendered fat or tallow onto the skin, let it sit, and then scrape it away, pulling trapped dirt and grime off with it. Essentially the same principle as the Roman oil and strigil method, just using whatever fat happened to be available locally instead of imported oils. And plain dirt itself, counterintuitively, was sometimes used as an early cleansing agent. Certain fine clays and dry soils can absorb oil and odor from skin, which is the same basic principle behind modern clay-based face masks. What looks like the opposite of hygiene to us was, in a very literal chemical sense, doing some of the same job, just with dirt instead of a jar labeled purifying clay mask on a store shelf. Over in ancient India and parts of Asia, an entirely separate cleaning tradition developed, built around plants instead of fat and ash. Soap nuts, from a plant called sapindus, were boiled and crushed to release natural cleansing compounds, producing a mild lather even without any animal fat involved at all. Alongside that, ancient Indian skincare routines incorporated turmeric, holy basil, neem, and sandalwood paste, plants chosen not randomly, but specifically for their antibacterial and skin-soothing properties, some of which modern research has since confirmed actually do have measurable antimicrobial effects. Neem in particular shows up again and again in traditional medicine texts specifically for treating skin conditions, and modern lab studies have found real antibacterial compounds inside it. So by this point, you've got at least 4 separate ancient solutions to the same basic problem, developed independently, continents apart. Mesopotamian ashen fat soap, Egyptian oil and alkaline salt cleansers, Greco-Roman oil and scrape bathing, and Indian plant-based lathers. None of these cultures were in regular contact when these methods first developed, which means humans, across multiple separate points on the planet, arrived at strikingly similar chemical solutions to the same problem, using nothing more than fire, animals, plants, and trial and error passed down across generations. And that convergence tells you something important. This wasn't one clever idea invented once and copied everywhere. It was the same underlying chemistry, alkaline plus fat, oil plus abrasion, plant compounds plus friction, getting rediscovered again and again by people who had no way of knowing anyone else had already solved the exact same problem a continent away. And that's really the story underneath all of this. Nobody sat down one day and invented cleanliness. It was built slowly, piece by people paying close attention to what actually worked, what smelled better, what stopped wounds from getting worse, and what made a fabric come out of a river looking less filthy than it went in. Every one of those small discoveries, the ash, the oil, the strigil, the soap nuts, eventually funneled down through thousands of years of refinement into the bar of soap sitting in your shower right now, which you'll use for about 10 seconds tomorrow morning without thinking about any of this at all. Which, honestly, is exactly the point. The fact that you don't have to think about it is the end result of an enormous amount of ancient trial, error, and quiet chemistry, figured out by people who had absolutely no idea what a bacterium was, but somehow, through nothing but observation and repetition, figured out how to fight one anyway.